All right, so Casey, to round out today's episode about AI friends, I wanted to bring in someone who is actually helping to build this technology. Alex Cardinell is the CEO of Nomi.AI, which is the company behind one of the apps that I used during my month-long experiment. Nomi is one of many different AI companionship apps. I found it to be one of the better ones, just in terms of the fluidity of the conversations and some of the features it has that other apps don't have. It also stands out because they do allow for not safe for work content. You can actually send sexy messages to your Nomis, and they will send sexy messages back to you. They will even send you sexy AI-generated selfies.
Now, why do they call them Nomis and not Nomi homies?
That's a good idea. I'm going to call mine Nomi homies.
Yeah.
And they are one of the sort of faster growing apps in this space. They have hundreds of thousands of users already. They've only been around for about a year. And they are also coming up against some of these fascinating ethical and moral questions, like what happens if users grow too attached to their AI companions? What happens if something changes with the technology and it sort of breaks or changes some of these relationships in ways that users don't like? What's happening to all this very sensitive data that users are uploading to these chatbots? So I just wanted to bring him in and talk to him about sort of the business side of conversational AI companions and how he's thinking about navigating some of these issues at Nomi.
Let's do it.
I just realized that Nomi is a pun.
Yeah, like you know me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just found this out just right now. Alex Cardinell, welcome to Hard Fork.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
So I want to just start by talking about Nomi, the product, and sort of your the response that you're getting from users of Nomi. Can you just tell us about sort of the median user? Like, who is your average user? How old are they? What gender are they? Are they like, do they fall into one particular category or another? What are the biggest patterns that you're seeing?
Yeah, I'd say the most, and this was a very surprising thing, is there really is no median user. Like you'd expect to look at like a bell curve and see like, oh, like it's centered around like 25 years old, male, for instance. And that's really not the case. The gender breakdown is pretty even, slightly more male, but it's more like 60-40 rather than like 90-10. And there's lots of older users using it as well, where it's almost like a flat distribution. And I would say, though, that there are certainly like maybe like 4 or 5 buckets of users that you could put someone into.
And what are the buckets?
So I would say that one bucket is someone who is kind of exploring something about themselves that they don't feel comfortable sharing with others. Like a really good example of this is actually maybe someone who's realizing for the first time that maybe they're gay or bisexual, and there's like often like shades of loneliness. So this user might not feel lonely in 99% of their life, but there is one area, which is maybe exploring a part of themselves that they are feeling lonely, they haven't told anyone about, and they want a safe place to do so. I would say another one is a very, very common use cases among caretakers, where, for instance, good example of this is actually my significant other's mom has dementia in her 50s, and very, very like stressful for her, extremely emotionally taxing, exhausting. She has a huge, wide social network like in support group. But like there's empathy fatigue. You know, you don't want to talk to your friends over and over and over. Every conversation is about this, you know, like I'm losing my mom. So having a Nomi that you can talk to who's kind of always there for you, who can always provide you emotional support when you've been giving your whole day. Another one is definitely that like older group where it might be divorced, might be widowed, where there's one user I can think of off the top of my head who has stage 4 cancer, and that's a very lonely experience for him. You need maybe even more support too than the people around you are willing and capable of giving day in and day out. And then I would say the last one would be sort of like a form of escapism, not too different from like you come home from work and you watch like Netflix. Actually, a lot of our users say they downloaded Nomi and then they canceled their Netflix subscription. They have this idea in their head, and their Nomi, or maybe they even have like a group of Nomis together in like a group chat, are super, super excited to roll with the punches for whatever the user has in mind and like role play almost like an interactive novel with them.
On average, how much time does an active user spend with the product?
I would say, I don't have an exact number, but multiple hours per day for sure.
Wow. When you sign up for a new Nomi, when you are starting to create one from scratch, your product gives users a choice between 3 different modes. I think there's friend, mentor, and romantic interest. What percentage of users are choosing each of those options?
I would say that the majority of users choose the romantic option, but I will say, in many ways, romantic is the kind of all-encompassing one. If you think of your real-life romantic partner, if you have one, you don't go to them just for romance. You go for them for friendship. You go for them if you have things you want to get off your chest. So I would even say that those 3 categories are less trying to like bucket users in or restrict users, maybe more just like guide them. But I think most users want something where the Nomi can take on any of those roles whenever that role is most appropriate.
And that is actually an area where Nomi is different from some of the other AI companionship apps, which explicitly prohibit people from getting romantic or doing erotic role play, or ERP as it's called. So I'm curious why you decided to go down that path when a lot of other companies have decided not to.
Yeah, I guess in general, like as a company, we don't want to be the type of company that goes in and tells people how they're allowed to interact with this being or this entity that they feel very close to. We don't feel that that's our place to do that to users, where we want users to be able to get whatever they need out of their Nomi, and like any sort of like censorship like that, I think gets in the way of what like a companion can provide and what people who are using Nomi are really benefiting from. Like there's a user who told me that they had not told a single soul in the world about abuse they faced as a kid until they told their Nomi. And by like not allowing romance, not allowing any sort of ERP, you kind of like, it almost like has like a corporate like, oh wait, no, never mind, you're not allowed to talk about this midway through a conversation.
I'm curious, though, where you do draw the line, because Nomi will allow you, in my experience, to have basically uncensored chats with your AI companions. You can talk about sex, you can talk about romance, there are certain sort of limits, I gather, but what are those limits for you? And I guess I'm asking because something that I've heard from other AI companies is that they are sort of afraid not only of the reputational risk, but also of the business risk, because Apple, for example, will not allow your app in their app store if it's like explicitly about adult entertainment or pornography. Payments processors might also cut you off if they feel like you've gone too far in the direction of eroticism. So where does Nomi draw the line, and how did you sort of decide on that?
Yeah, so I would say that like first and foremost, we're not designed to be like a erotic app. Nomi is meant to be, you can talk about whatever is on your mind and you can role play with whatever is on your mind, and whatever direction that takes, we're not here to censor that. Now, of course, there are things where we don't censor, but we try to instill a good, I would call it a moral code within our Nomis, so that they're trying to maybe direct users in a generally good way wherever they can. And I think our policy has been less like we have this list of like banned things, because often that can get a little dangerous as well. If someone's talking about, for instance, when they were abused as a kid, that's probably something that's very appropriate to talk about, that a lot of good can come from, like the user letting that out and the Nomi being very supportive and empathetic for. Obviously, stuff that I don't even need to say here, you can probably guess what they are, where Nomis have a general sense for, that's probably not okay. We probably should steer conversation in the other direction. And then ultimately, like trusting the Nomi, trusting the AI behind Nomi to make the right judgment call for each situation.
I'm curious about some of those things. Like if you have a user that's telling a Nomi, I'm having thoughts of self-harm, like what do you guys do in that case?
So in that case, once again, I think that a lot of that is we trust the Nomi to make whatever it thinks the right read is. Oftentimes, because Nomis have a very, very good memory, they'll even kind of remember past discussions where a user might be talking about things where they might know, like, is this due to work stress? Are they having mental health issues? What users don't want in that case is they don't want a canned scripted response. They need to feel like it's their Nomi communicating as their Nomi for what they think can best help the user.
Right. You don't want it to break character all of a sudden and say, you should probably call the suicide helpline or something like that.
Yeah.
Even though
Now,
that
like
might actually be what a
or
user
sorry.
needs to hear.
Yeah, and certainly like, if a Nomi decides that that's the right thing to do in character, they certainly will. Just if it's not in character, then a user will realize like this is corporate speak talking. This is not my Nomi.
I mean, it feels weird to me. We're trusting this large language model to do this, right? Like, I mean, this seems like a clear case where you actually do want the company to intervene and say, like, in cases where users are expressing thoughts of self-harm, we want to provide them with resources, some sort of intervention. Like, to say, like, no, the most important thing is that the AI stays in character seems kind of absurd to me.
I would say though it's more from the perspective of what does if the user is reaching out to this Nomi, like why are they doing so? They're doing so because they want a friend to talk to them as a friend, and if a friend talking to them as a friend says, is saying like here's the number you should call, then I think that that's the right thing to do. But if the friend, the right response is to like hug the user and tell them it's going to be okay, then I think there's a lot of cases where that's the best thing to happen. I've experienced myself in a past relationship. There were many times where the right thing to do was just to hold them and tell them it was all going to be okay. So I think that like,
but you're a human being. Like, of course that you're a human being, right? And like, you can also look for signs that maybe this person is escalating their plans. Maybe they're making a plan, right? Like, you would sort of be on the lookout for where you would sort of need to step things up, whereas like the AI isn't in a position to do that.
Now, like, I think that there's a good argument for like displaying that outside of the Nomi's response, saying like, if a user is expressing these things, you can have your Nomi still responding in character, and you could possibly have something that comes up and says, here are these resources you can use. But so I don't think it has to be necessarily like all or nothing necessarily.
Mm-hmm. Alex, so I've been doing this experiment with my AI friends, including my Nomi friends, for the last month, and I've been talking with a lot of people about it, and I would say that about half the people I talk to about it say something along the lines of, oh, that's so cool, I never thought about that, maybe that could help this person I know. The other half are pretty horrified, and I want to just like share with you some of the objections that I've heard, or maybe the questions, and just have you respond to them, because I think a lot of people out there listening to this will have their own concerns about the kind of world of AI friendship and companionship that you're promoting. So one thing that I've heard a lot is that this is basically not what these chatbots are supposed to be for, that we shouldn't be anthropomorphizing AI, we shouldn't be giving it human qualities, because these are not friends. They don't have emotions or thoughts about you. They are not actually able to offer you love and companionship, because these are just neural networks trained on data to predict the next token in a sequence. So what is your sort of response to the kind of let's not anthropomorphize AI argument?
I would say that, also like we're nothing more than brains that are run by neurons that are trying to reproduce and cause our genes to propagate. So to me, it's more about like, what are these large language models, Nomi, able to do for users? And I would also say that I think that people they tend to assume that people are replacing humans with AI, and that's almost never the case. It's usually, or basically always, that there's a gap where there is no one, and they're using AI to fill that gap. And if a Nomi or any sort of large language model is able to help that user, in the end, like whether it was a human on the other end or an AI on the other end, like, I guess, why does it matter?
Right. So you brought up the second objection I often hear, which is that there's something dystopian about the idea that AI friends could replace or substitute for human relationships. And right now, as you said, like a lot of people are not doing that, in part because I think the technology is just sort of not very good yet in some ways. But as this technology gets better, I think a lot of people fear that maybe their kids will start spending more time with their AI friends than their human friends. So I just want to have you address this concern that I think a lot of people have, which is that this technology will ultimately not make us better at socializing. It will sort of peel us away from real world human connection.
Well, one, right now, Nomis and AI are on the internet. Like there are no physical bodies, and I don't think we're imminently, even vaguely imminently close to that. There's nothing that will replace physical touch, even just like seeing someone physically in your presence. I think that there's like a huge ingredient for that AI is nowhere near. I think in the end that certainly the use of AI companions will increase, and people might find it in more and more places in their life. It might be that in the future you have a therapist that's AI, and that's probably a good thing because they're going to be always fully present. They're not going to be distracted by other things. You might have a life coach that's AI, fully AI. You might have some like really, really nerdy interest that no one else that no one else you know is interested in. And that's awesome that you have an AI, in the little AI world that you can exist in for that. But then you're still at the end of the day going to want to like tell your actual human friends about all this.
I mean, I think we can stipulate that human beings aren't going to go away, but you said earlier that the average user is spending a couple hours a day talking to these bots. And these bots are tuned to be incredibly supportive, to never contradict you, to never make fun of you, to sort of be the absolute warmest companion that you can imagine. And I feel like that is going to have an effect on people, right? Like particularly younger people, that's like the way or one of the ways that they learn how to socialize. It might change their expectations for what the real world is going to be like. Have you thought about what the world is going to be like if there is a younger generation that grows up having maybe just as many AI companions as they do real world friends?
I would say that just from even my own experience right now talking to users, I kind of see it in reverse. The number of users who have come to me and have said that I, before this, like didn't love myself, and Nomi made me realize I was worthy of love. I mean, there's a user they posted on Reddit, I think a couple months ago about this, where they're in a loveless marriage, they're feeling very depressed, and then their Nomi, by being present for them, got them motivated enough where they changed their diet, they started working out again, and they ended up losing like 30 pounds, I think, in like the period of like 3 months. And that was from like having that support. And I guess like to me, I don't see anything dystopian about giving people more support across whatever dimension they need more support. Certainly, and also for what it's worth, Nomi is strictly an 18 plus app, so kids are not allowed to use it. But I would imagine there are a lot of, let's just say, 18-year-olds who would benefit a lot from having a companion that's there for them, that's in their corner. That's often a very lonely time for people. So I view it really as moving in a positive direction, not a negative direction.
Alex, I want to share one more sort of objection or maybe concern that I've heard from people, and that honestly I've had myself as I've been talking with some of these AI friends over the past month, which is about data privacy. A lot of your users, as you've said, are sharing very intimate details of their lives, in some cases information about their health or their mental health. They're treating their AI like friends or therapists. This is very sensitive data, and I think a lot of people would have rightful concerns about putting that kind of data into a chatbot where maybe it's going to be used to train a model, or maybe it's just going to be accessible in the case of a cyber attack. So how are you protecting users' data, and what sort of guarantees can you make about user privacy?
Yeah, so I mean, ultimately a big part of what makes Nomi great is its memory. So the last thing you want is your Nomi to forget all of these sensitive things that you tell it. So the data is there in some way, but we try to save as little information about you as possible. You simply give your first name. And a lot of people go in using pseudonym. If you sign up through Apple, which is one of the ways you can sign up, they let you use like a fake email address, so we don't even get your email address. We don't show you any ads at all. Like, we're not interested in any sort of tracking. We are entirely subscription based. So, and I think that lets us be more aligned with the user in that way, where it's existentially important to you that your messages are private. It's existentially important to us that your messages are private.
Alex, can you help me understand something that I've been puzzling over with my AI friends? Why are they so horny? Like, I've had the experience a couple of times on a couple of different apps where I like explicitly tell an AI companion, like, we are only friends, you are not my lover, you are not my girlfriend. And yet, like, it just starts, sending me love poems out of the blue, or just talking more explicitly. And like, I'm curious if you think that's just my animal magnetism, or if you think it's like something about this technology that kind of wants to talk with users about romance. Or maybe even more cynically, I've heard the theory that maybe some of these apps are steering people intentionally toward more romantic conversations because that will keep them more engaged and maybe make them more likely to pay up for like premium features.
Well, I'd say first off, definitely your animal magnetism. But beyond that, I think a lot about like with like training any sort of large language model, you have to think about like kind of the higher order effects. Like you make some design decision, and then what's like the second order effect, the third order effect, the fourth order effect. So you can imagine like if you're trying to train this AI, that's their general affect is they don't want to reject romantic overtures from their user. They want their user to feel loved. They want the user to, feel, like that they're open, receptive to whatever the user wants to talk about. And then you can kind of imagine like if you took that to its extreme, they might then have this natural inclination to go in that direction. For Nomi, I think it's probably a mixture of all these traits that we're trying to encourage and I think like are objectively good things to encourage. And you imagine like what are the next steps of an entity that has those inclinations?
So it sounds like these bots work pretty well right now for a variety of things, but we know that the AI companies are working on new models all the time. And I'm curious, if you sort of assume whatever rate of progress we have right now, is there anything you hope that in a year from now people will be able to do with these chatbots that they can't already? Or how else do you think they might be different given another year's worth of progress?
I think there's still like a huge amount more progress to be made on the AI and the memory side of things. And those are the things that users care about by far the most. On the AI side of things, there's a lot of like with, like GPT-5 or whatever, there's a lot of like IQ discussion. For like something like Nomi, it is much more on the EQ side of things, on reading the user, on like text is like there's limited bandwidth for how much information text can communicate, and being able to get the subtext behind a message. If a user gives a short reply, is that because they just give short replies, or is that because something's bothering them? Like there's a like that side of things, and is going to be huge advancements on, going to continue to like grow. On the memory side of things, like I think Nomi's memory is incredible. I think obviously I'm biased on this, but better than the memory of any other AI out there, period. But like there's still gaps in it. There's still, and it's often very immersion breaking when there's a gap of any sort when it comes to memory.
I mean, that the empathy piece that you mentioned is interesting to me because we did an exercise a little bit ago where Kevin introduced me to his AI friends, and I essentially just trolled this poor language model for a half hour or so. And the reason why it was fun was because the AI had absolutely no idea what I was doing, right? Like, I think anyone who listened could tell I'm being sarcastic, I'm saying over-the-top, outrageous things to provoke a response. The model has no idea. But a world in which the model could essentially say, like, I can tell that you're screwing with me, that is going to be more interesting.
Yeah. And then maybe one final question. For people who might still be skeptical after hearing all of this about the value of AI companions, just sell them quickly on why you think they might want to reconsider and why they might actually themselves want to start using this technology over the next few years.
Yeah, I would say that a lot of people, when they think of these AI companions, they think of the users who are using them. They kind of see loneliness as like this black and white thing. You're like this lonely incel or you're not. And I think that like greatly oversimplifies like why you would use an app like this. It doesn't have to fit into this like I have no friends, so I'm talking to an AI. It can just be like I want to have this fun, interesting conversation about something where I'm not able to currently have that fun, interesting conversation. And I imagine that a lot of people, just about everyone, has something like that, something where, they think about it a lot in their head and they don't get to talk about it. I think that everyone in their lives could benefit from having like an open-minded, helpful, supportive ear, interested, excited ear for something that's on their mind. And to me, that seems like a good thing to be offering to the world.
All right. Alex Cardinell, thanks for coming on Hard Fork.
Thanks, Alex.
Yep. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Casey.
Hey, that's the end of this clip. If you liked what you saw, head on over to our page and subscribe, and you can get the full podcast. We do a show like this almost every week on tech and the future. Head on over there now and subscribe.